On this
Crazy.
line of thinking, though, there's a common take that is AI is the next like .com bubble, which
Oh, some of
always
that's true.
which I hear like I hear people say that, and it sounds to me like they mean, this is going to fail. But like the .com bubble burst and the internet won, right? So
Right.
like
Mhm.
we need
Yes.
to decouple like how are investors going to be irresponsible, and is the technology going to have the promised effect, right? Those are two separate conversations.
I think both sides are going to get what they want out of that, right? So people who say it's the .com bubble, you are going to see 80+%. I'll put money on it now. 80+% of AI startups wash up on the beach within 5 years, right?
Yep.
The majority. If you're not building a foundation model, thanks for playing. Good luck to you. Like that's going to be the reality. And even if you are building a foundation model, like if you're not the number one or number two player, again, you're going to have good luck to you unless you found a novel niche that GPT-7 won't occupy. And you've already seen this, right? You've seen AI companies get founded, have traction, and then the new OpenAI model or the new Gemini or the new Claude model comes out and they die. All in like a year.
Apparently, this is what they say in the Bay Area now. It's like, why is your startup, like, how is your startup idea impacted by GPT-7? I think
Right.
there's this kind of existential question that's coming through of like, if you really did have this level of intelligence, why is your idea not? And there are many reasons why you should still have startups. I agree. Relative to other revolutions as well, there is this interesting case where like you have to have a certain level of burn rate to even be in this game now. I think that's one of the problems. There's a lot of vaporware people who are just
a lot of rappers
do not have billions of dollars to do it, and they just make a wrapper and really aren't adding anything. I think the difference is like,
and we get back to this like idea of Chris, you said it, of like the rub is the G, it's general, right?
Yes.
And so it's like, yeah, it's going to come for everyone, right? And it's going to, and as it gets better, it gets generally better, you know?
Yep.
No, that's where like
it is.
You might actually, back to the llama conversation where you're like, who's going to use this? And I made the joke that there's going to be some risque adult version, but you're going to have people do things that might be the only defensible moat is places where the main models won't touch it. So I expect that you're going to have people win in drug discovery, right? Things that are really scary that maybe that's just a wrapper sitting on top of OpenAI, but you're going to have something there. You're going to have people make digital boyfriends and girlfriends. You're already seeing that with character AI.
That's huge.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you go on to the audience, go on Reddit and look at the character AI subreddit, and it will change your perspective on who's using AI. It is not just the geeks. It is people falling in love with I think character AI is not even sexual necessarily. Right? It's just conversation, feeling heard. That is surprisingly, the dog agrees. That is surprisingly a big deal.
And look, like just on that point, AI boyfriends significantly more popular than AI girlfriends, which is to say, like, probably the skew of having more female viewers or users is actually very interesting. Kind of mirrors, like, and Chris might be able to talk to us about like phone games versus the normal gaming space. So it's not just going to be geeky boys. You will probably see many like things tailored to like lots of different audiences. I do think there's this case where like the foundational models are also intelligence, right? And by intelligence, that is also like a resource, right? It's not like, so now the technological like changes where like, oh, this is like mildly useful to things. Having discrete resources is almost like printing workers or printing people to do things for you. But all it takes is like electrons. Like that is a totally new concept. And we can make more data centers. We can make more electricity effectively, right? So you can basically scale up resources without being like, oh, I'm going to go employ 10 people. It's like, no, I'm just going to use, like whatever big companies, random server I have no idea about and have the ability of like 10 people. Like that is way different to other technological revolutions. Again, whether it pans out, I'm still, maybe on this podcast, I am slightly the decelerator in a sense, in that like I'm still maybe keeping on a little bit of a but I do think like some of the best advice I've ever got from like people pretty high at Microsoft is always follow the money, right? And to Chris's point, there's a lot of money being thrown around from billionaires, from people who have access to a lot of resources. I hate to like pull this example up because I know lots of like tech people love it, but like crypto, like I don't think we were seeing the same level of investment.
Not at all. Not
the
at
big
all.
companies didn't drop everything and say we're the crypto company. They were like, what?
You were seeing like drunken yacht party money, right? Like people were sitting around and like, I'll throw $100,000 at some, bored yacht ape. I forget what they're called, the bored apes. Yeah, there's all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The dog agrees. He's got a rowdy
I mean,
dog
it was
here.
also my as somebody who was marginal, like, tangentially involved. Like it felt to me like crypto was only allowed to happen in the way that it did because tech was stagnant and bored, and people needed stuff to do, and people wanted a way to make money. It was like once AI came around for real, right?
Yeah, I agree with
And
that. There was
part of it
also
is there's a competition for GPUs is another thing, right? So
yes,
so
Yes.
it's hard, And then there's a lot of proof of stake. They're moving off of like proof of work, like Ethereum and Bitcoin and beyond, right? But it's still like there's a compute battle happening, and AI promises to potentially revolutionize the world economy, and crypto promises to revolutionize the world economy in under the hood, right? So the ideal state of crypto is nothing changes, but it's all crypto. And
I think to put on the designer hat, one of the other things was crypto was like, here's this insanely complicated thing that's incredibly hard to get involved with, and if you do it wrong, you're breaking securities laws, and you're probably going to get all your money taken anyway by some fraud.
Right.
And so it wasn't exactly the best pitch for your average consumer in the way that AI is much more bringing computers to be more the way you want to interact. You're taking computers and making them personal. So there is suddenly computers are relevant to me in a way they weren't before if I'm the average person. I can just talk to a super intelligence and it will respond to me at my level and scale up the conversation as I go. There is an interface difference here that is profound, even beyond the intelligence or otherwise. It's massively different than type your info into this really sketchy site and hope you're not getting scammed.
Copy paste this 100-byte wallet address and pray that you didn't copy paste.
You memorized that, right? You didn't write it down, did you? No.
You're like, yes. And look, into your point, I think we should continue elaborating on this later on, but the degree at which AI has evolved in the last couple of years has been immense, right? The fact that, I don't know if the Turing test has been officially broken or whatever, but we just take for granted now that you can talk to these things coherently, pretty much assume it's a normal person. I mean, look to character AI. You literally have characters that people are just addicted talking to.
Yeah.
And then talk about the fact that now we're even talking about agentic, and what we mean by that is it can go off and do things. Just a couple of years ago, we couldn't have images, we couldn't have videos, and now we're just multimodality. I guess that's just a thing. And then 2 months later, we're like, where's the next one of an AI? It is crazy pace. So if we just take a step back, it's it really does seem feasible that 5 years of progress would allow the intelligence to get better. These are probably solvable problems.
The movie Her went from fiction to within sight. I mean, I remember it was cool in tech that you could get a flash drive that was big enough to store Wikipedia on it. And now it's with some of these miniature models, you're going to have something 10 times more knowledgeable than that in your pocket that you can access without an internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
That really brings it home in many ways. You're like, holy cow, what used to be the entirety of the internet is now in my pocket.
Yep.
And I don't even need an internet connection to talk to it. That's wild. Even before you get to multimodal video, imagery, all that.
It's like someone who actually knows the whole internet and can respond to you. So it's not even you having to read through billion-page book. It's someone that is almost like an oracle who's oh, I know where that book is, and here's the information. The next step is that oracle actually understand that information and act on it. Because then suddenly you're hey, I want to know about starting a business, but actually, can you just tell me what I should start a business on, how about you go do it? These are obviously not quite there. I mean, we do have a paper we want to talk about, which might be for the next episode, about the fact that we're getting even close to that now. But it is crazy to think the pace. And I think a lot of folk, if you're not in the tech space, you kind of don't see this rapid change.
It's just a chatbot. If you're not in the tech space, you're there's a cool chatbot I can talk to, and you're not, because it hasn't been delivered to all the services you're used to.
And maybe ChatGPT was you had your wow moment, right?
Yeah.
And you've had a year and change to sort of internalize it, but you haven't made the next leap, right? You haven't looked at, what does this mean when it's completely multimodal? What does it mean when it's doing self-play? What does it mean when there are a bunch of agents going behind the scenes and they're all smarter than you? And
I think there's another moment coming where it's going to be building something in front of you, and that breaks people's brain. Because
isn't that kind of Cloud Artifacts, and that's why it took over Twitter?
Yeah, but people don't know that. People don't know that's out there yet. So, in sort of the normal space outside of tech, someone I know, I mean, they're a retiree, right? They successfully argued with their HOA using ChatGPT.
Uh-huh.
That was like revolutionary to them, right? Because it
Yeah.
could grok what the HOA was saying, it could look at all the laws, and it could come
Yep.
back and say, here's a bulleted list. And no matter how persistent the HOA was, it could just generate a response and keep coming back. And they were just copy pasting. This isn't some fancy API access. But that's where they're at. They're thinking about this as like, oh, this is like an intelligent chatbot that can write me emails and it can write me documents. And I think that's the biggest, like, the future's here, not evenly distributed moment is we're looking at it going, you're going to get to, and this is another episode, you're going to get to an internet that's entirely personalized.
Mhm.
Like, you're going to get to being able to have this thing make stuff just for you, right? We aren't used to bespoke technology anymore because for the longest time it was you had to make something that could be commonly used by 1 billion people or 100 million people or 1 million people. And now you're getting to this thing can make something that just needs to be used by you, and it can ingest content into that. That is a really big mental shift that's hard to grok.
Yep.
Grok.
And in an interesting way, people have been like sort of having to warm up to this, right? Like, you know, as you interact with the internet over the years, right, it's become more and more personalized, like more and more echo chambery, more and more fragmented. But it's like, but it's not actually personalized, right? It's like this like least common denominator personalization.
Yes,
how can we put you into one of the 6 buckets that we have?
Yes, yep,
and then rile that bucket up, right, and make them click. And so, you know, I think an optimistic view of this AI personalization is that it like is actually giving you what you want as opposed to what you think you want, if that makes sense.
Right.
I was going to say that on the other end of the spectrum, though, that is also worth calling out is people who need to, I think, warm down a little bit, and that they are so trying to like understand this without maybe having all the like technological backing that they're like screaming that like OpenAI is a dead company because we haven't had GPT-5 come out, right? Like the degree at which this is becoming useful is absolutely bonkers, right? Like, you know, this research, like AI has been a thing for like the last like 50 years, right? These are things and concepts that have just like come online because of, you know, certain technological advances, Moore's law, etc. Like, again, good podcast episodes. But I think some people in the tech space definitely do need to be like, you know, because their expectations of unbelievable exponential scaling weren't met in the last year, they're like, this is dead. You know, like I'm going back to crypto, right? And I think that's not necessarily the right way to view it. It should be like, hey, we're talking now societal problems, right? There are very real things, and, you know, even talking about the nationalization point, there are probably things like even not being released right now, which are insane. Like we can only like speculate and think about what they're going to be and try and like extrapolate out. But I think people are not taking in that like when you talk about like a massive change like this that takes only 10 years, that's insane. You think of like how fast the physical world changed, it's so much slower. So to think that the software is going to crazily change and we have this like entirely different paradigm is going to be very disruptive. And I think sometimes the like timescales proposed by a lot of folks are like actively like detrimental to society. Right? If we did have this like super intelligence in like a year, I don't think we're ready for it. And I don't think, you know, like politicians and like the law is going to keep up with it. I mean, for good reason. It's hard to.
And I think building off your point, there's this assumption that if we waved our wand and let's say GPT-5 is true AGI, it's extreme, it's multimodal, it can do all these things, that suddenly all the applications we're dreaming of will just manifest. Right? We still have to build. We still have to build with the AI otherwise, but you're still going to build services, right? Even in an AGI world, someone still has to figure out what the McDonald's menu looks like. Someone still has to figure out what your personal website looks like. Someone still has to figure out how cars work. You're still going to have to take a long time to take this better tool and actually see it manifest things in the real world. There's this assumption in the AI space that like overnight everything just has an agent and everything's Blade Runner. And you're like, no, that all takes time to build. The holograms take time to build. The personality of the robotaxi takes time to build, right? All of these things take tons of time to build. So I think that's a weird thing in the space right now, is that people assume just when we get a model of the sufficient level that we're waving a magic wand and it's all there. It's like, no, if you want a tax prep agent, you still got to work with the thing. You still got to tune it to do this. You still got to focus it. You still have to figure out the right interface. That's a whole different episode, but it's not obvious to me that people want to write paragraph-long prompts forever. That seems crazy. And so there's still a lot of unknowns to AI. and the sports centerification of model races on Twitter is crazy, right? It's like LeBron misses a basket and suddenly he's trash, right? Like OpenAI doesn't release a model every other month and suddenly they're dead. And you're like, oh, that's insane.
I mean, I am kind of here for it. It makes like the last
That's
3 months
entertaining.
have been super entertaining. Whether that's actually useful or not, like when we're like building on stuff, like I
Right.
don't know, but it is entertaining.